Hi again. Welcome to the People's Food Summit 2024. I am here with Karen Nekesa, a sister and a friend who's based in Kenya. We just know that she's in Kenya by location, but we also think that she is our African advocate in the areas of seed and food sovereignty. Karen, you're welcome. Welcome to our
Thank
call.
you. Thank
And
you, Precious.
thank you for taking it so early in the morning. That's really nice, because life has been very busy lately for you. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, before I spend any time or mess up your credentials, please just tell us briefly who you are, what you're involved with right now, and we can just continue with our chat.
All right. Thank you so much, Precious, and thanks for hosting me. My name is Karen Nekesa. Yeah, and thanks for calling me an African advocate. Sometimes I find myself in this field of networking, collaboration, and influencing policies at different levels. But I work for an organization called Seeds and Knowledge Initiative, but also supporting regional schools and colleges permaculture program in advocacy and communication work. For the Sky regional team, I'm supporting them with communication work around farmer-led seed systems, and just to have the farmer's voice reach the world. You know, farmers are the foundation of the seed and the food that we talk about. And without farmers, we cannot be able to survive. And that is what I always tell people. Farmers are very important, and they should be at the center of everything that we do around seed and food sovereignty. But I also just want to say that people might wonder how I became this passionate about seed and food. It's because I come from an indigenous community in Western Kenya, but now working for in Africa. So I'm working supporting different organizations, but also advocating for farmers' rights. So in this indigenous community, I like talking about this because this is actually what made me really passionate about food. And I lived with my grandmother in the village. So I learned a lot about how to look after land, how to select seed, how to grow the best seed, how to manage the seeds, how important African food and indigenous food is, and how nutritious it is. So then I came into this movement working for civil society organizations, but I'm professionally a journalist. But immediately I left my journalism class. I decided to work for civil society organization, at first trying to edit farmers' voices and the community's voices in terms of reports and annual reports. But then later, I just got into this passionate way of advocating for their rights in terms of seed and food. So currently also I'm the co-chair of the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, Agroecology for Climate Action Working Group. And we are supporting also in terms of getting people together to understand what climate action is, but also advocating for agroecology to be included in the policy spaces from the national level to global level. Currently, we are working with negotiators to ensure that people's voices, especially farmers and the community, in terms of climate action, their voices and the issues they face are actually discussed at the UNFCCC level. So I think, Precious, briefly, that's what I can say about myself.
That's a beautiful brief because you're carrying so much on your shoulders. That's definitely, and maybe the first starting point is to say thank you for being this powerhouse and this voice for Africa. So for those who do not know, Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa is an Africa-wide network, which
Yeah.
is just short of what, 2 to 3 countries to be purely Pan-African, like existing
Yes.
in every African country. That's
Yeah.
one organization that has really led the movement in the continent. And that's where, Karen, you are serving as the chairperson for the Climate Action Group, where we participate
Yeah.
together. Okay, that's really amazing. And then with
Thank
the
you.
Seed and Knowledge Initiative, first started as a sub-regional
Yes.
place for pulling together knowledge. That's where we also contribute in the landscape and AE courses and youth mobilizing, but you are helping us push out the communications and making sure that the movement really grows beyond the boundary limitations that exist in Africa. And you are all the way up in East Africa, but just last week you were here in Zimbabwe, Southern Africa.
Yes.
So that's really
Yeah.
awesome. And I gleaned that also your passion comes from the fact that you were raised by a grandmother. I think grandmothers
Oh,
need a
yeah.
special award because in the end, they really produce firebrands.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, thank you so much. You know, I heard you speak about the involving the agroecology in the COP spaces, the UNFFC. Can you tell me how's that going? Like, how's the movement building? Are we winning? And yes, our voices being there is a win, but you know, what's your perspective?
I would say that this is really a legislative win. I will begin by saying that. But before it was not easy. You know, when you work with the negotiators, they're representing countries, and each country has its own different context in terms of climate, in terms of weather pattern changes, you know, all those issues come in together. But also, again, it's about influencing these negotiators from the local level, and that's, I mean, from the government at the national level. So if we do not actually involve them at the national level, then we fail. The other issue, just before I get to how it is going, is when you want to involve the negotiators on climate change, you really have to understand the national adaptation plans and national determined contribution, NDCs. So what we are doing as a climate working group with AFSA, and also to get, I mean, scaling up to the other organizations within the African network, is to ensure that communities, farmers, and when I talk about farmers, I don't only mean farmers who grow and plant the seed, but also we talk about indigenous community. The pastoralists are able to understand how to participate at the national level in terms of policy influence. So we have managed to really mobilize these countries, but for now we've worked with about 12 African countries in AFSA, just as we scale up to the other, because you know AFSA, you said, is left only with 3 or 4 to become a Pan-African, yeah. So we want to scale this up to the other countries. But of course, when we do this, we share information across all the African countries that are within the AFSA network, so that they can also engage in terms of having communities engage and participate in NDCs and NAPs. So once that is done and dusted, we now bring them together into a continental discussion, continental dialogue. So we get to understand where the challenges are, what are the achievements at the national level. From there, we are able to synthesize information that we can now take to the COPs. So I would say that since COP27 in Egypt, it has been moving smoothly. And because also we have been engaging and supporting, sometimes financially, the negotiators, the Africa group of negotiators, to understand what agroecology is.
And
Because what we
that's
talk
a long
about,
process because those walls are very thick. That's
yes,
the walls are very
it's,
thick. And I wanted to, yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to check, like, what has been the entry point? I'm sure it's been a long time coming for us to really be found in those spaces where we now influence those who are
yeah.
negotiating in the room.
Mm.
Maybe it's a nice place to also chip in and fit in what has been the strategy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So the strategy, that's why I chose to begin from the national level. That
Mm,
has been the strategy.
mm,
And at the national level, the other strategy has been, governments develop what we call country positions. So
mhm.
we have placed ourselves strategically in these countries to ensure that our voices are heard into the country submissions that will be submitted at the COP. So I was getting into the synthesizing of information into now that continental voice. So we do this and come up with a position for the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, pastoralists, indigenous community, women and the youth, just which we present at the COPs. So since we've been very active since COP 27 in Egypt, and this is where we were able to really convince and influence negotiators at that level to accept agroecology. And just to not to say too much because it's a long story, is that now they accepted to have agroecology as a future topic in the UNFCCC. And so currently, from the Bonn meeting, the SABSTA meeting this year in June, we also had a discussion with them. It's still there under sustainable agriculture approaches. So what we need to do is to now, as a working group of AFSA and networks within the continent, organize and get somebody who can really talk about agroecology at the UNFCCC space so that they understand it well, and then we can start organizing for workshops at the global level for people to understand agroecology. So I would say, Precious, it's been a journey. Consistency is very important with negotiators. Consistency is very important with policymakers from the local level at the national level. And then what you get is actually you start harvesting fruits bit by bit. So we are doing this, and we are able now to really work together with negotiators at the global level, and they have accepted agroecology. And now they can talk about it and believe that it works.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it does sound like we are moving towards having a focal person or focal persons.
Yes.
that we can have in those rooms. So okay. So usually, like policy, I think has to be informed by grassroots, which you work with grassroots, all family farmers who are doing agroecology, who then fit into the policy space. I believe as a communicator, that's one of your main roles. How do you rope in these communities to get into, because do you also bring them physically and you also take their stories, and because they're also scientists in essence, because they are the ones with the results.
Yes.
So how do we bring that and consolidate it up in the top spaces,
I agree.
for example?
Yeah, thanks, Precious. That's very interesting. And I agree with you. They are the best researchers. When we work with farmers, it's fun. I would say it's fun. One is because they have this indigenous knowledge and practices that they really refer to when we are discussing issues. And so what we have been doing is to just have these community-led initiatives by having researchers engage the community, the farmers, in terms of research, so that they don't leave out the information that farmers have and the indigenous communities have. So this is something that we have been doing, and this has been done mostly with support from partners in different countries and members in different countries, just to bring these stories together for amplifying. So one thing that is very important before we even do this research is to ensure that the community is aware of such information in terms of conducting research. So if they are aware, and if you really build their capacity to understand how important it is for them to share that practical information, I call it practical because the community is hands-on. It's not just about written. It's not about, sitting on your desk and checking what is happening. It's about what they do every day. It's about what they see. It's about what they experience. And so I say experience because we also work with communities who really protect what we call natural sacred sites. And when you look at these natural sacred sites communities, they're very passionate about indigenous knowledge and the culture. And when we talk about seed and food sovereignty, it's about control over your own resources at that local level, but also having it culturally appropriate. So when we have this, building their capacity, but also just making them understand and also participating in research at that local level, then they're able to now get the confidence to participate and raise their voices, either through interviews. Sometimes we conduct interviews so that we get their voices at that local, at the national and global level. And this could be done through podcasts. We do some short videos. We also do the submissions actually have the community voices, and also have media just engaging them. And some of these journalists we work with as a network bring in a lot because they're able to go to the communities and get their stories. Some are actually feature stories that have really, really encouraged the negotiation process, especially at the global level. But something else I want to say is that, first of all, in this seed and food sovereignty movement, when you talk about communities and the farmers, whichever way you want to put it, the communities have really tried to preserve their own indigenous seeds. And we know that this is very important in terms of bringing evidence at the global level. So we can be able to show how communities have their own seed banks at the local level, but also have to understand how they have revived some of the lost seeds. And now we are able to use it, especially now because it is resilient to climate change. And some of these seeds have been revived. And when we talk about cassava, when we talk about finger millet, when we talk about sweet potatoes, this is food that we could actually have even when the weather is really bad. When our grandmothers were alive and our forefathers, these are foods that we really, really had. And now we are losing them. Some people are actually demonizing them and saying they're not nice. What we want is bread. But what I'm talking about and bringing on the table now today, as we celebrate World Food Day, is to ensure that people really appreciate indigenous traditional food and also revive their seeds and show that this one has been brought back. We really didn't have it, but it's coming up back slowly. But what I call to governments is to just my call to action to the government and policymakers is to really look at farmers' rights and really encourage them to share and save their seeds.
Sure, Karen. I could listen to you any day, all day.
Thank you, Precious.
Yeah, it's giving me chills. I mean, such passion exuding from you. And as we were talking, I've always been thinking deeply, language is very important. And I think in our movement, words are also very important. How we place them is also important. I realize we don't talk about food security. We talk about only sovereignty. Can you tell me the difference and why that matters so much? I think it's nice for anyone who listens to this.
Yeah, for me, food security, let me start with that. Food security is having someone just enjoy anything, not nutrition. So we do not really use the security word because it can actually bring in food that is not appropriate and culturally appropriate by a community or by a country. Because one, you have no control over that. And most of the time, it's not local. That is why we see when we are facing hunger in our countries, they bring food aid. And normally what you see is just maize and beans. And you do not know how these maize and beans were produced. But when you talk about food sovereignty, it's control over your land, your water, your seed, all the resources that you have. And that is why I bring in the issue of farmers having control over their own seed, not relying on corporates to get seeds, but they control their own seed. Secondly, is seed that is culturally or food that is culturally appropriate. I know I was in Zimbabwe a week ago, and there's diversity, That is what we mean by sovereignty. There's diversity. You cannot go hungry in Zimbabwe. You cannot go hungry in South Africa, in Kenya, in Uganda, in these African countries. They have food they identify themselves with. And so it is very important that when you talk about food sovereignty, we are actually asking that we have control of our food. We have our own local food, which is sustainable. Sustainability means food that is resilient, seed that is resilient to any type of climate. So when you look at the two differences, security and sovereignty, is that sovereignty for me simply is just enjoying any type of food, but sovereignty is nutritious. I was in a meeting the other day and we were talking about messaging. Somebody actually said, malnutrition begins in the soil. And somebody else actually said, very important one. He said, eat nutritious, not color. So that is what we mean by sovereignty. So I think for us as a movement, as a network, we really support the word sovereignty as compared to security. Thank you, Precious.
Malnutrition begins in the soil. That's so powerful. I think totally adopt that because as we are running towards growing season here, so we're obviously reminding each other again how to plant agroecologically. And I think that's a new slogan for me. I wish you knew who actually said it, and it's a nice quote. Malnutrition begins in the soil. I'm sure many people
I
have.
know the person who said it.
Okay,
It
cool.
was a participant. I was having this training in Zimbabwe. A
Yeah,
participant from Kenya called Erastus Minor.
Erastus
He
mind.
works for Rodi Kenya,
Oh,
at
Lord,
a training
yeah, that's
center.
beautiful.
Yes.
Yes, that's very nice. That's amazing. Yeah,
And I
malnutrition.
was impressed because most of the time, sorry, Precious, for
Yeah,
cutting you short.
no, no
Most of
worries.
the time, we care about the seed only, the plant,
Yeah,
and forget that our soils have been poisoned.
yes. And I
So we
think
should
that's where
actually
we
take
have
care of
the
that.
that's where we have the, the initiatives, healthy soil, healthy food. Like, don't talk
Yes,
healthy food without talking about where it comes from. Like, what's the
exactly.
community of where it comes from? So that's really powerful. And you know, just when you said that you were in Zimbabwe, because we are in the midst of a heavy season. We had the
Mm,
worst drought,
mm,
El Nino-induced drought in the last growing season.
mm,
And I think as a region and colleagues, as we were learning from what was happening, yes,
mm,
there was failure, but because of the agroecology movement, regeneration movement,
mm.
encouraging farmers to tap into local wisdoms and planting the crops that will withstand um, all forms of harshness. That's why you
Yeah.
can see some displays in Harare. I'm
Oh,
sure if it
yeah.
was last year or last of last year, you would have seen like a lot more. Like
Mhm.
for us, people are like, oh, this year wasn't so good, but it's still wow. It's still
Mm.
an array of
Mm.
days. You still enjoyed all our local cuisines. Same
Yes,
with
amazing.
communities. And I feel like
Mm.
the El Nino was really coming to embarrass the maize industry or the maize industry. The
Yeah.
total failure happened with the maize crop, especially. It was just, and if a farmer only did a monocrop, they
Mm.
definitely were hard hit. But when you do
Yeah.
a mixed planting, your resilience
Mm.
is sure because you are definitely going to harvest other things that are not maize. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's really powerful. And
Mm.
I guess that's where you come in for messaging to then
Yes.
you push all these highlights. What were some of the highlights that came out for you from the Zimbabwean Seed and Food Festival?
Number one, for me, because I was so much with the Seed and Knowledge Initiative, what I really liked is the farmers gathering. Most of the time, and these were not farmers from South or from Zimbabwe only. We had farmers from Malawi, Zambia, and South Africa joining the Good Seed and Foods Festival in Zimbabwe. That to me really meant a lot. Most of the time, we just think about ourselves as civil society organization staff or people working for CSOs and forget the farmers. And I said before when we began that farmers are everything. Without them, we cannot survive. Without them, we cannot even get this messaging, Precious. So what's really brought me, gave me a lot of energy was the farmers that we had at the Zimbabwe Seed and Foods Festival. And then, the presentations they made, finally, they were given some space to speak, and they sang a song that was farmers related, with information, with messages that cut across, and that was really, really powerful. So when we bring farmers also to such events, that's very important. The other thing that really impressed me is that Zimbabwe has made this to be an annual event. And now it's not only for Zimbabweans, it's for it's the whole continent was there. The Africans and people from other European countries are there. Funders were supporting people to participate. It has become something that we really have to learn from and do the same in other countries. I know other countries do that, but it's not as much as what I saw in Zimbabwe. So to me, that is a highlight, and that is a lesson I've learned to communicate across the continent so that other people can learn from it. And I think I got so much information. I'm really, really struggling to work on the footage and the pictures and issues that came out. It's really taking time, but I think with time, even if it takes me 6 months, I'll be sharing bit by bit. The other one is the value addition Zimbabweans have. As we speak, I came with so much rosella, hibiscus, whatever you call it, baobab powder, baobab juice. We rarely get that. I was impressed. They even had food that really attracts the youth and the children. Ice cream made rosella, ice cream made from baobab. And when you enjoy it, it's very nice. I tasted the one for mulberry and it was beautiful. It was that very nice taste. So I think that is also the other highlight I bring, but also the issue of how really people are talking about agroecology. I thought really this is now becoming an issue. Everybody now is just talking about agroecology, regenerative agriculture, biointensive agriculture, permaculture. We have all those terminologies, but I think we
Yes.
all meet at the agroecology. So because of all the principles, and I saw all the principles of agroecology, come from the Seed and Food Festival in Zimbabwe. So we really have to keep up this, and especially because of strengthening networks on seed and food sovereignty, it's very important that we keep talking about it and sharing more information. I think pressures for us, and even for Regeneration International, we really have to send out more and more messaging. But something that I really also enjoyed is the use of local language. That is fine, so that we can actually get somebody to interpret. And actually at the Seed and Knowledge Initiative dialogues, we also encourage that. That is why we had farmers. Sometimes we say, oh, because this farmer cannot speak English, cannot communicate in French or English, we cannot take them. But this should not be an issue, especially for us who work with farmers and communities. I think we can be able to interpret to them, for them to follow the process, for them to understand that whatever they're doing is being appreciated and is being done in other countries. I think I want to finalize by saying that the Seed and Food Festival in Zimbabwe was powerful, and it brought different people together. It brought the young people, the youth, everybody else was there. So I really appreciate the organizers on this World Food Day, and really want to encourage other African countries to have that and learn from that, so that we can have many more Seed and Food festivals in our countries.
That's so powerful. And the language commentary is also one of the very big ones, because this is a cultural movement. This is a movement that acknowledges local wisdoms. And
Yes.
it's only expressed in local language. So every language matters. And if we want to internationalize it, it's nice to have translations. That was such a powerful commentary. So maybe just as we are wrapping up our chat this morning, I hope those who were listening visualized what was going on.
Yeah.
Because Karen did such a good job, and I feel like you really gave us a nice push as Zimbabwe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And congrats to the organizers again for bringing everyone together. What could be you had a message for policymakers to create spaces for farmers, but I think another piece is the funders. What's the message for funders? Because I think the wave is showing direction of where the money should be put at grassroots. Like, what is your special message to them? And we can nicely conclude, and you can wish the world a happy World Food Day when you're done talking about funders. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Precious. I think, first of all, I really want to thank the funders. From the space we are, Precious, I know you also know that we are now, agroecology is actually being felt by the funders, and it's really attracting funders to support it more. But a message from me would be, let us fund initiatives that are more impactful. By saying this, I mean where we bring farmers and everybody together to just have a dialogue, but also showcase. We're also doing what we call My Food is African campaign in Africa. And I think this is also a campaign that is moving so fast. So if we can have such initiatives and really just have more resources going to campaigns, more resources going to farmers, initiatives, bringing them together. I know The exchange visits are powerful. If I bring a farmer from Zimbabwe to Kenya, for them to learn, they will share a lot of knowledge. So such initiatives are what I would really want to request and to really request our funders to keep supporting us. But I really appreciate so far the move we have made. And during our policy work, we have actually recognized this, that the funders are really supporting our work, but just request that they support more of farmers-led initiatives, but also including more of the food and seed festivals, because what brings us together actually also is food. Food is social. If we're enjoying a meal together, we are doing so well, and that is when you enjoy the meal better. But if you sit alone in a room quietly and eat, you not even enjoy, you might not even finish that food. So food brings us all together. And so I just want to say that, Precious, and really wish the world a very, very happy World Food Day. And please, let's keep local, eat your own, know where your food comes from, grow your own, eat your own. Thank you so much.
And that will be a wrap. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, World, for your ears in our morning. I'm sure it will be your afternoon by the time you hear this. But thank
Yes.
you. Karen, have a beautiful day. And I really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Precious. It
Yeah.
was a pleasure. It was such a
Yes.
beautiful dialogue.
Oh,
And we
thank
hope
you,
that the
then.
world will listen.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Okay. No,
Yeah.
yes, Karen, thank you.
Thank you, Precious.